All right.
We're taking all the best old school wisdom and blending it with the top new school methods to bring you the optimal coaching strategies. This is the 80-20 Baseball Podcast with Coach Bo.
Welcome, coaches, parents, even you players that are listening. Welcome to the 80-20 Baseball Podcast, the 80-20 Baseball Masterclass, where we are trying to master those key parts of youth baseball and baseball in general. It is great to be here with all of you for our weekly get-together. Today, we have part 2 of the interview with Coach Gore, with Nick Gore, and Nick is going to answer the question, what are the biggest flaws he has seen with youth pitching over the years? Nick is also going to discuss what he thinks is the most important part of practice and also what not to say to pitchers in the middle of a game. And he'll have a suggestion as to what to say to pitchers that can be more productive. Before we dive into part 2, here's a strategy that will help us, that can guide us to using our coaching time, our practice time, our training time more wisely and more productively, more effectively, more successfully. We need to allocate more time to upstream skills and actions. So many coaches and young players tend to allocate much of their training time to downstream aspects of the game. For example, outfielders making throws to third base or making throws to home plate. Now, while these parts of baseball definitely impact a game or the outcome of a game, it is much more important that we teach our outfielders to catch the ball, to get to the ball, to keep a single and not turn it into a double or a triple, to take good routes to the ball, to communicate. If we allocate a lot of training and practice time to relay throws, and double cutoffs and our cutoff throws, and we don't allocate a lot more time to getting to the ball, to catching the ball, to fielding the ball, we have our priorities out of order. And our priorities are simply what we spend more time on. Not necessarily what we're thinking in our head, not necessarily a list on a piece of paper. Priorities are what we show them to be by how we allocate our practice time. Now, that's one small example where I've seen coaches spend just as much practice time on their relays and cutoff throws as they have on catching fly balls and taking great routes, the balls in the gap, and just getting to the ball and fielding it cleanly. How many times at the youth level does an outfielder run up to the ball and then it goes right by him and it turns into a triple or an inside the park home run? So it's important that our paradigm focuses on the upstream skills first. Upstream would be catching the ball, fielding the ball. Then what happens after that, of course, is now the downstream skill or action. Of course, those downstream skills impact the game and the team's success. It is important to allocate sufficient practice time on upstream skills. Without mastering these fundamental skills, such as catching the ball, fielding the ball, taking good angles on the ball, in this case for outfield, we should master the upstream skills and then work from there, or at least allocate our practice time with the ratio in mind of how much it's going to impact the game or how often it impacts the game. Without mastering these fundamental skills, in the example that I just gave with the outfielders won't be able to make successful throws if they don't have the ball. It doesn't matter how great the cutoff or relay is if the runner's already scored, or if they make it to third base and it's not a close play. Similarly, players need to have a good hitting approach to increase their chances of getting on base. So base running comes after hitting. You can't be a base runner until you have a good at-bat. We all know this. Base runners are almost always a result of a good at-bat. And if a hitter gets on even 50% of the time, say they have a 500 on-base percentage, that still means they had twice as many at-bats as they did opportunities on the bases. And as they start playing more baseball and move up, they might be on base 40% of the time. So shouldn't we practice our hitting approach, hitting with 2 strikes, optimizing our swing, being on time for the pitch? Shouldn't we focus on that with a similar ratio? If hitters get on base 40% of the time that they go up to the plate, shouldn't it be a 5-to-2 ratio when we're allocating our time? You got 10 at-bats, 4 times on base. Shouldn't it be a 5-to-2 ratio of hitting practice to base running practice? Well, it doesn't have to be perfect, but at least you get the idea. Upstream versus downstream. What are the skills that happen the most, and what are the skills that happen less often? And also, what skills and actions come after the initial skill or action that's needed? So let's make sure we master the first part before we move on to the second part, or at least spend more time on the first part than the second part, because inherently it's going to happen more often in the game situation. So let's allocate dedicate more time to upstream skills and actions and less time to downstream skills and actions. Hope this message helps the paradigm when you go out there as a coach. You can go out there and see the game with more clarity. You can see the priorities with more clarity. You can catch yourself if you're spending too much time on a downstream action. You can catch yourself faster and go from there. So it's not about being perfect, but definitely something to keep an eye on. Upstream skills versus downstream skills. Upstream actions versus downstream actions. Let's keep our priorities, our focus on the upstream and work from there. Now I have a bonus message that I want to share before we dive into part 2 of our interview. Here's a message that I've used with players that has resonated very well. I'll tell players, quote, "It's completely okay to have emotions. Just don't let the emotions have you." If I have a player that has a little bit of a meltdown, it's okay to have emotions. Just don't let the emotions have you. So it's a message that gives players somewhat of a green light to have emotions, but it also gives them the awareness to put on the brakes, to come to a stop when the emotions start to have them. It's balance. It's not black and white. It's okay to have emotions, just don't let the emotions have you. So I've shared this message with players and it resonates well. It doesn't feel too constricting. There is a very clear message that, hey, we don't want our emotions to have us. So something for you to chew on and possibly use with your players. Players, it's completely okay to have emotions. Let's just not let our emotions have us. If anything, it plants a seed for our players to keep an eye on their emotions, to have awareness of their emotions, not to completely shut them down, but to have a little bit of a governor that can prevent outbursts, breakdowns, meltdowns, etc. All right, now let's dive into part 2 of our interview with Nick. Nick is going to start off by answering this question. I asked Nick, what are the biggest flaws that he's seen with youth pitching and youth pitchers over the years? Let's dive in.
Youth pitching. What's a common flaw that you've seen? Again, there's a lot of flaws. Listeners, I think, of the podcast know that just because we say this is the one flaw doesn't mean there's not a dozen different types of flaws or even more. What's the most common pitching flaws that you've seen? And then what would be a suggestion for coaches to coach that out of pitchers?
Part 2 starts here.
Yeah. So here's the really cool thing is what I see a lot of the same flaws in hitting equate to the same flaws that I see in pitching, right? Again, using the upper body to throw the balls, not throwing from the ground up, not starting with our hips first, those types of things. But one of the biggest things that I see and that I eliminate right away is I don't let kids really under the age of 13 throw from the windup. And the reason why I do that is because it's just too much movement for them, right? So you got to think of pitching is almost like doing tee work or free throws, right? The mound never moves, home plate never moves. The only thing that moves is the body. So the more the body moves, the more I'm not in the same position to throw a pitch as from the same spot every single time, right? And that then equates into what? Into timing, right? If I'm off time and I don't have what we talked about being when hitting with being landing in a launch position, well, and the same thing, if my arm is not up in a position to throw a ball downhill and my body's late or my arm's late or out of time, I'm not going to have success throwing strikes. And that really is one of the biggest things that I struggle with. I mean, yeah, of course, we're going to have a lot of flaws with mechanics, but consistently being on time is something that I see struggled even all the way up to the high school level. I can't tell you how many times I could literally look at the pitch and I can tell before it's even thrown if it's going to be a better pitch to throw because if kid's ball's not out of his glove on time, right? And then I'll sit there with some of my coaches and be like, good, like he's on time before like right through the windup. The next thing you know, boom, it's a strike. Because I've lived in that world that I can tell what the difference between being on time is and being late with the arm. And that's the biggest thing I see. I mean, obviously we're going to see the front side pulling and the head pulling off and elbow below the shoulder and all that fun stuff, right? Those mechanic things. But a lot of those mechanic flaws that we get to are compensations because the kids aren't on time, if that makes sense. If I have a pitcher who hasn't landed in a position where he can throw downhill and get his arm to where it needs to be, the body's going to naturally create a path of least resistance to be able to throw somewhere in the general direction of where it's going. And then that's going to cause the elbow drop or the front side to pull off or the top half to fall off to the side or all of those things. So if you can create an environment where the kid is on time consistently, then those mechanics have a lot better chance of being better. But if a kid is super late trying to throw a pitch and his arm is way behind his body and everything's already gone and slide open and right, his elbow's going to drop because the only way it can go and the next he's throwing what I like to call uphill instead of being on the mound and throwing downhill because his arm never got into a slot to be able to throw downhill. And then we see pitches that are all over the place. So that's why I really try to simplify these boys and say, look, start in an athletic position. I don't want your feet together on the mound. If we're going to start in the stretch, we're going to be shoulder width apart, and we're going to pitch from the same spot, the same location, the same everything every single time to eliminate movement to get you even more off balance or out of timing.
I like how you're removing variables. So set the pitcher up in the same spot consistently. You want to remove the variables as much as you can. The biggest takeaway I got right there, Nick, is, and I think you hit the nail right on the head there, just spot on, that hitting and timing. It gets talked about, although I love how you prioritized it and where you said it should be prioritized in the hierarchy of teaching hitters on the importance of hitting. So I thought what you did was really do a good job of highlight the importance of it and where it could be worked on and how to work on it. Pitching, I think the timing issue, talking about pitching being something of timing, doesn't really get talked a lot about. You'll hear this, they had a consistent release point. Anybody who's been in the game of baseball has heard consistent release point 1,000 times. And then you hear they'll say the kinetic chain, the this, that, and the other. Really, it's just about timing and really trying to get that timing more consistent. And it not only helps pitchers have more control of their pitch. You could say some people call it control, some people call it command. I don't, tomato, really just being able to locate the pitch consistently. And not only that, being on time is probably one of the best things we can do or pitchers can do to reduce the injury risk. So being on time with the pitch, it just syncs up better. Everything's in sync. So I like how you're using the no windup. I've always said this, Nick. I think the windup is a lot of flair, a lot of flash. It's a lot of shine. And I don't really think it helps a lot of pitchers pitch better. I do think there might be some. I had a pitcher years ago who I thought it helped him. He went over the head with his glove. He did the over the head deal. I'd let him do it because I thought it helped him. But very rarely I feel that the whole windup is better than just simplifying it going from the stretch. In fact, when I was in college ball, I think my freshman year, sophomore, I played for Coach Dave Snow at the time. He was a pitching coach, one of the more well-known pitching coaches in the country. And he just said, all right, we're going to put you in the stretch only. I think I started a game against UCLA and pitched from the stretch only. So you're not doing anything that isn't already being done at every level, coaches. This isn't like abnormal. If you watch the Major League Baseball season, you will see starters that do this, and some starters do it the whole game. In fact, the pitcher 20 years ago, some famous pitcher went from the stretch. I don't think it was Pedro Martinez, but anyways, they just went stretch. It was like a playoff game, just went stretch the whole time or after the first inning. So I really like what you're doing there. Are there any other flaws that you see or anything that another kind of main tip for coaches and pitchers?
Yeah, one of the big things too is they see obviously kids flying open, right? How do you correct that flying open with the front side? You want to pull against the front side. You go through the whole thing. You need a firm front side to throw against to create velocity, all that high level stuff. Right. But we want to simplify it. How do I get a kid to stop throwing with his upper body? And a lot of it is a throwing program, right? Being in a position that how do I throw properly? And I know one of the other questions that we were going to talk about that we're going to get into, and I don't want to get too far into that, but the playing catch portion of practice should be the most important part of practice. And even up at the upper levels, having a throwing program of how these kids mechanically should throw a ball correctly is so lost because no one pays attention to it. It's coaches go out to the field, here's some baseball, go down the line, get your arms loose, right? Yep. They don't play catch with a purpose, right? When you're playing catch, you're not just getting your arm loose, you're playing catch with a purpose.
Yep.
So one of the biggest things that I see is the front side, a lot like hitting. When I land, when I'm pitching, once my foot hits the ground, the first thing that should go, just like I'm taking an active take, should be my hips. My hips should fire first, and then everything else should be coming with it. But again, a lot of our youth players, they want the whole front side goes. They want to throw with their upper body because they think that they're going to generate strength by pulling and spinning horizontally on a flat axis. By pulling that elbow on the front side, and the whole front shoulder comes off. So one of the simplest things that I've learned is when we separate our hands, of course, we want both our thumbs basically to point to the ground, which is great because that's going to put us in a position where my throwing elbow on the backside can get above my shoulder before my hand does, right? Which is a huge portion of how we throw baseball correctly. But what gets lost is when that front side, that glove side, when you don't turn it to the sky and pull back like you're going to elbow somebody directly behind you. That eliminates, by turning your hand over and palm to the sky, that eliminates the ability to pull off on the front side with your front side. right? So if my hand's down, I can swing my hand with my palm down horizontally. But when I turn my hand over, it's not as comfortable to do, especially if my arm's bent. So when I turn my hand over and I pull back, like I'm trying to elbow someone behind me, that eliminates that whole front side flying open. Well, not necessarily eliminates, but really helps that. And it's such a simple, small little thing to do, but it gets lost. Well, why is he flying open? Why is he pulling off of this front side? Well, he never turns his hand over. If he turns his hand over and starts pulling back, his elbow is going to come back towards him instead of pulling off if you're right-handed towards first base. And that's one of the little simple things that I try to work with the kids to eliminate that side of it. And again, what also helps is the fact that when they're landing and they're in a position to throw, right? Like I call launch position for hitting, the first thing that happens is my hips go and then my upper body comes behind it. So in our throwing programs that I associate with our kids, we actually work on that aspect of it every single day. Again, we'll get to that. It's one of the biggest things is having an actual throwing program. And the crazy thing is I didn't get into a throwing routine, into an actual throwing program until my senior year in college. And then I was like, how is this not incorporated in every year that I've ever played? And yeah, we've had somewhat kind of routines, but an actual structured routine of how to play catch with a purpose wasn't taught to me until Gary Adcock, that's over at CDU now, who was a pitching coach at Purdue and UCLA. They took over the head job over there and turned it into an NAIA school, into a D1 monster right here just in my backyard, basically in the last couple of years. But the biggest thing with him is playing catch with a purpose.
Yeah.
And that gets lost in youth sports. And even because I'm coaching right now, 14U, and then some of the 16-year-old kids as well, I watch them play catch. And even with the throwing program that they're supposed to follow, it just goes out the window constantly. And it's, okay, guys, we've gone over this how many times? We're not just playing catch to get our arms loose. We're not out there talking about Fortnite and God knows what and who, whatever, right? We're playing catch with a purpose. What are we working on? What are we trying to do? Because then it becomes, I'm just going to get into the game and I'm just going to be able to make a throw. Well, why? Have you just had 80 throws that you could have worked on making good throws or using the right mechanics or being focused on, and you didn't? And then now you're going to get into practice, and then the first throw you throw from shortstop is off the backstop, or off the fence. Well, why was that? Because you didn't actually work on what you were doing when you were throwing. You were just getting your arm loose. Those translate into, like I said, I go back to a future question I know what we're going to talk about, but that translates into, again, preparedness and being in the position to be successful on the mound, to be able to put my body in the same position every single time and be successful. And then like stuff that you were talking about, his release point is consistent or the kinetic chain is consistent. Yeah, because he's on time. Yeah, because he gets his body into that same position consistently every single time. And you can't do that if you're a little bit off. And you've hit it on the head too. You had a coach took you out of the windup. Well, you and I are both big dudes. We're both 6'8", right? So if we're off just a little bit, that means it's going to be even more so than someone that's a little bit shorter than us, just because of how things work with our height. So if we're off an inch with our feet or our lower body, we may be off 4 or 5 inches with where our arm slot is, compared to if someone that was shorter with us, they're off an inch, maybe they're only off 2 or 3 inches, right? So his philosophy probably was the same thing, is how do I get this big body dude that throws gas in the same consistent spot every single time, right? And then we look back and you see, and I see this as a big problem too, is you'll have pitchers in the windup, right? They'll throw an entire bullpen in the windup. They'll throw their entire pregame warm-ups in the windup. They get into the game, throw strike one, dude hits a double, and now we're in the stretch for the rest of the inning. And I haven't thrown a single pitch out of the stretch in my bullpen session or in my warm-up session. And now I have to somehow pitch out of the stretch. So it's not even that, say Bowman gets a base hit. And now I got to hold a dude on and pitch out of the stretch with a slide step because he's a leadoff dude. And I got to be what? I got to be on time. And I haven't thrown a single pitch to be on time yet, except for the one pitch that I hope that we threw from the slide step when our catchers threw down. So again, it's like, why are we even in the windup when majority of the time we're going to pitch out of the stretch throughout the course of the game? Unless you throw a perfect game and no one gets on base, you're going to be in the stretch. But yet we have dudes that want to pitch in the windup all the time. And that's one of the, also the reasons why I eliminate it. I mean, you got some of the guys throwing the hardest in baseball, like Chapman. That dude doesn't throw in the windup. Chapman throws in the stretch 100% of the time. Yes, he's a closer and he should absolutely throw in the stretch because he's going to come in those situations. But again, if I got a dude that can throw 106 or whatever he throws and he's doing it from the stretch, then there's no argument that a pitcher should ever throw from the windup because he throws harder, if that makes sense.
Most definitely. And I don't think it costs any velocity. I think you can simplify it. And I think coaches, you might have a pitcher that, I don't know, over the years, it seems to be about 1 out of 20 pitchers that does benefit from the windup, but everybody else, it's just negligible or it hurts them because it's just a bunch of extra movement that it doesn't do anything to produce a better pitch. Yet it opens the door for some posture issues. It opens the door for balance issues. It opens the doors for a lot of poor movement. So I love how you talked about pitchers being on time. The 2 mechanical tips that you threw out I think are really good. Throwing routine, yes. And
absolutely.
I would, when I'm running a team, I think other coaches look at it like some kind of foreign. It's like this, what's going on? That coach is actively engaged and involved. Now, eventually I'll phase myself out of a throwing routine because it's something that should be automated and put on autopilot, giving the kids the autonomy. Kids want structure. They like structure. They thrive in structure. Now, if you overdo it and micromanage and critique everything, they're not going to like that. But they like structure. Kids thrive in some structure. Trust me, coaches, they will like your throwing routine. There might be a little hesitation. There might be somebody that rolling their eyes because they want to go out and just chuck it sidearm and throw some whatever and just some funny stuff. But at the end of the day, 99% of kids, I would say 100% of kids they prefer to have structure over not having structure, especially out there on a field in a team environment. But they're not always going to show it. But you have to trust us on this. And then the stretch, getting pitchers in the stretch. I think that's a great recommendation you make. And okay, coaches, so what if you're against that? You want them to do the windup or the pitcher's really fighting to do the windup. But what if they're 1 year from being at the level that there will be, like 12 years old? The next year, there will be runners that will be stealing on them. And why not start doing the stretch the year before or a couple years before in the bullpens, at least in the practice sessions, the bullpen sessions, just getting them ready. Why wait to learn, especially like the stretch? So it's a good move either way. Nick, did you want to add anything on that before we move on?
No, I think we're good with what we talked about there. Like I said, a lot of times it's keep it simple. And I do want to add one thing too, is coaches, and you hear this all the time, stop telling your pitchers to throw strikes. Just stop. Yes. They know. Parents, if you're listening, stop telling her, throw strikes. Really? I mean, he knows that. Give constructive criticism. Give them something that they can work off of. Like, hey, get your glove out of your hand a little bit sooner. You're a little bit late. Give them something constructive that's going to help them that they can focus on to maybe be more successful than throw strikes. And you hear it all the time. You got to give them something positive. You got to get something in their mind that, okay, it's one of two things too. It's getting their mind off of, oh, I don't want to walk this guy, or I don't want to do this, and versus, okay, well, coach is telling me, hey, if I get my glove out a little bit sooner, I'll be more successful. So let's do that. Oh yeah, it worked. And it changes the mindset of don't throw another ball or don't walk this kid. And I think a lot of that too is we didn't really get into the mental side of pitching. It's almost the same philosophy, right? If you're going to go out there with the fact that don't walk this kid or don't do that or don't give up a hit or don't do whatever, then most likely that's going to happen versus, dude, here it comes, bro. Good luck hitting it. I know how hard hitting is. I know it's the hardest thing in the world to do. Here's a fastball. See if you can beat me, right? And I think for some reason, kids get afraid to throw to hitters, especially in the middle of the lineup or whatever it is. And they're like, oh, don't walk them or don't give up a hit or don't give up a home run. And all those negative thoughts that come into their mind then create negative results.
Yep.
Right. It needs to be that same mentality. Is when I'm on the mound, and what I tell a lot of my young pitchers too, is you got to pitch aggressive. I said, you're in a massive advantage. You're in a massive advantage. Hitting's the hardest thing in the world to do, right? He's not going to beat you. Majority of the time, you're going to win this battle. So stop trying to be so perfect and be like, dude, here it comes. I'm throwing this ball past you, or I'm getting you out. There's no chance you're going to hit off me. And have that mentality, like that killer instinct mentality. And I'll tell you, my mindset on the mound when I pitch versus my mindset on the mound when I hit were very different, right? Pitching was like a controlled anger, right? And hitting was more relaxed. You're not going to beat me. Come on, give me something to hit type deal. Versus it was more of a calm, I guess, mentality versus almost like a controlled rage.
Yeah.
That I had to pitch with, because I was a power pitcher. I pitched aggressively. I wanted to throw balls past dudes, and I knew that you're not going to beat me. And that has to be the mentality when you're on the mound. And if you pitch scared or you pitch nervous, or I'm afraid to walk a guy, or I'm afraid to give up a big hit, or what if I lose the game, or those fears come into their mind, then those fears overtake, and that's usually what the outcome is. It's almost like you have to do the reverse. But Coach Curran said, right? Take the bull by the horn type. I used to love that stuff.
Yep.
Grab the bull by the horn, stare him in the face and say, you're not going to beat me. Here you go. Because I have the advantage and I'm a pitcher. And I think that mentality gets so lost in pitching too, because now it's the same thing that we were talking about. What's the biggest fear? Standing on the mound and giving up the game because I couldn't throw strikes and everyone's yelling at me? That's an awful fear for a 10, 11, 12-year-old. Even when you're playing high school, college, and pro ball, right? You have to be on that mound and everyone's staring at you and you're in control basically of the game. It's a lot of pressure. You don't want to be that guy that fails, but you have to have the mentality that it's not going to happen. We've all been there. We've all had bad games, right? You look back and like, man, I had a bad outing and we lost the game. It's a lot of pressure for us pitchers. So as coaches, you got to keep pitchers' heads right. And that's one of the biggest things. As soon as they start losing it emotionally on the mound, either anger or whatever, you got to take them out. And it's not taking them out because you were going to be mean to them. It's taking them out to protect them, especially at the younger age, because if they have a meltdown out there, they might not recover from it for who knows how many outings after that.
Yeah, definitely could be a lag, something that goes for maybe the rest of the season or even longer. Your point about putting something positive in their mind, and none of these kids are going to go out there like a Zen monk and just be able to just completely be subconscious and in the moment, like meditative. They're going to have thoughts in their head. It is what it is. There's going to be thoughts. So why not fill that mind with thoughts that are productive? Give them something to do. The whole just throw strikes is crazy. It's so ubiquitous. If you just took a step back and listen to like what you said, and I've said a few times over the years on this podcast, once you hear a 2-minute explanation, you're like, oh yeah, that doesn't make any sense at all. I think of this when you say the throwing routine. So you have a throwing routine, but then I've helped coach so many young teams and youth teams where the coaches don't set up a throwing routine. And then when the pitchers get in the game, they're like, hey, you got to throw more strikes. And I'm like, hey, coaches, take some ownership. You let the kid down by not establishing and putting them in a good position and didn't prepare them with a good throwing routine. How can we get them in a better position to throw strikes? And then also, like you said, you don't think they're trying to throw strikes. I'm on the base level of they're trying to throw strikes. Now, I know somebody could argue the one little argument is like, yeah, but I really want them to just focus on that strike zone more. Well, okay, then I would say lock in on that glove with your eyes or something like that. I do want to move, Nick, to the next question. This one's for new coaches. This is a team culture question. Say a new coach it's their first year or they're relatively new. What's a tip that you have for new coaches that want to establish a good team culture? Now, team culture, right, is a lot of different things like hustle, playing hard, being coachable, or the kids getting along. Like, what's something that you've seen work or something you've done over the years that's helped create a better team culture for your teams?
So one of the things too, a lot of times when you have a new coach coming in, it's going to be at the lower levels, right? It's going to be T-ball, rookie, single A type level. It's very rare that you have a new coach that's going to come in at a higher level, 12, 13, 14 years old, unless he knows baseball or has a background and just highly work or for whatever allows him to do that. One of the biggest things, especially at the younger age, is you got to find a way to make it fun and keep the kids engaged. And that's one of the biggest things, especially with the younger kids. You got to turn it into having fun, playing little individual games and making it competitive so you can find out, hey, what are the kids that are showing effort? Where those guys are? One of the hardest things to teach with youth sports is effort. And one of the things that I talk about with the kids a lot too is when I have them up, I say, hey, look, some of us, let's be honest, some of us were born with a talent, but they put that effort to perfect that talent. And some of us maybe weren't born with the same talent or didn't for whatever reason, but we're all born with the ability to put in effort. Right. So how do we teach a kid to show effort? Well, you got to put them in situations, whether it be some type of fun, competitive event during practice, or they can compete in an environment where if they make a mistake, it's not going to be penalized. So I love to do fun little games with the kids, either where they're competing against each other. It doesn't matter what it is. How many balls can we throw to each other during warm up without dropping the ball? Mm-hmm. Or how many balls in a row off the tee can we hit without swinging and missing it, even if it's all the way at the younger level? Or relay races around the base. So we're still incorporating stuff and make those things fun. But the other thing too that I just with new coaches is don't feel that, and I think this happens a lot of times too, is they know everything or they don't know everything. Like it took me a long time to learn how to coach the younger kids. Like I said, we talked about it at the very beginning, right? I came from obviously college to Division I, played professionally, and now I got to figure out how to dial that back and coach a 7-year-old and an 8-year-old so they can understand me. So, and I believe me, there was plenty of times where I went through patches in my man, I completely failed this practice or I completely failed. Like because I was still learning. And I think that's the biggest thing is for coaches too, is is say sometimes you're going to try something or you think you come up with a good idea and then it just all goes to hell during practice or during a game. And don't be afraid to abandon it and try something else. It's going to be a trial and error to find out what works for you. But the biggest things I said is make an environment that's fun, make an environment that the kids, they compete, and put kids in a position, even if they're not the best players on a team, where they can become successful in whatever that competition that they're doing, so they feel like they're a part of the team, right? And that's going to help with the team building and the team bonding. And then it's also going to help the kids that are better really root for the kids that aren't as good on the team, because they're trying to win this little mini competition within the team, within practice. And all of a sudden that helps create a little bit of a bond because they want to win and go from there. But you also have to be careful on the flip side, right? That if you have a kid that ends up losing whatever game that you guys are playing, or relay race or relay throws or whatever it is, that then they don't blame that kid for screwing it up or losing it for their team, right? There is a fine line with that. But like I said, the biggest thing is have fun, keep the kids engaged, make sure you have them doing something at all times with either groups, stations, whatever it is, and keep it fun. Like I said, we're talking new coaches. In my mind, new coaches is these guys, like I said, starting off T-ball, rookie, 6, 7, 8 years old type world. Find a way to make baseball practice fun. Home run derby, whatever it is during practice, all those fun things to make baseball fun. And don't be afraid to do team bonding events too outside of the field. Right? Have pizza parties, whatever, before the end of the season to celebrate. Get those kids together before. Hey, have pizza after practice or whatever it is, right? Just have a little pizza party after practice so the kids can hang out and get along and feel comfortable with each other, especially early on. Because, I mean, we were younger, man. Why you went down the baseball field, like everyone was a buddy, like right away. And now everyone's in a world that like, they don't want to talk to anybody. And you got to find a way to break down those walls and those barriers to get the kids hanging out and talking with each other. Because even at the older level, with my 14-year-olds, like getting them to talk on the baseball field and communicate on the baseball field is one of the biggest things I struggle with still, is they don't talk. Balls hit to wherever and no one says where the ball needs to be thrown to or pre-pitch or anything. And we force that in practice all the time. And it blows my mind that these kids won't ever shut up in the dugout when they're talking about God knows what. You put them on the baseball field and they don't want to talk baseball. It's wild to me, but that's a whole nother can of worms.
I would like to piggyback on, you said doing competitions, making it fun. One just simple is setting the expectation that there will be no trash talking, and then just be very firm. Like, hey, if you're going to come out, you're going to bully one of your teammates because they screwed up, you're going to get on them. I'm just going to ask you to leave practice and I'm going to call your parents. I'm going to ask you to leave. Okay. There's going to be zero tolerance. Now there's one thing about some banter, but you could do it that way. Another one that I've used that works really good is simply transitioning quickly from competition to the next thing. So for example, as soon as that competition ends, you don't sit there and have like an award ceremony and you don't sit around for 5 minutes. You actually have something planned to just segue right into quickly. It may be a base running drill. It may be batting. It doesn't give them time to sit there and bicker and or make fun of somebody or, hey, because of you, we lost. If anything, I think having a setting as you set the expectation that this trash talk's not going to fly. We're teammates. We're all on the same team. If you want to be a coach, you have to be okay with not being liked by everybody. If you're a coach that wants to be liked by all your players, you're not going to be the coach they need. You're not going to be the coach that you should be for them. It's just how it works. One other recommendation, so the kids that don't talk to each other or maybe they have their cliques, is something as simple as switching up their throwing routine partner. Most teams don't have a throwing routine at the youth level, which is, we've talked about at length here being a sad thing, but a throwing routine, a lot of times it's the same partner every time. It's their buddy from school. It's their homie, their best friend. No. Switch them up, rotate them through. You could just have a simple list, or you can just simply say, hey, you need a new partner this time, but just something as simple as switching up their throwing routine partner. So the really talented kid hanging out with the second most talented kid, maybe the best kid's hanging out with a kid that would feel a little bit better about himself if he was able to throw with the best, the all-star. The one caveat to that is some of these kids can chuck it real good. They can throw it pretty firm. You got to be careful sticking the flamethrower with the kid.
That was the one thing I wanted to note, and I'm glad that you pointed on it, because I've had situations where I've had kids that can throw and I've had kids that can, unfortunately it is recreational ball. We're talking Little League. I've had instances where kids can barely catch. The last thing I want to do is put them in a situation where I got a kid that's throwing and he squares him up in the face because his kid can't put a glove on the ball. So there is a little bit of a caveat to that. I do agree with absolutely moving these guys up or whatever, but then also in a way to protect them. One thing that I love to do too with those kids, with actually a lot of the boys, is I actually love to play catch with the boys too. Mm-hmm. And I do it for one of two reasons. One, it makes them focus on actually playing catch with a purpose, because now they're playing catch with coach. But on two, it allows me to take maybe that kid that is struggling or whatever, and it allows me to make good throws so he can work on the basic things. Because a lot of times you take those kids that struggle and they end up pairing up together, and the next thing you know, all they're doing is playing fetch the entire time. time and they actually didn't get better because they made 65 bad throws and they went to go chase the ball now. Right. So I like to play catch with those guys and hey, look, we're going to play catch together and you're going to focus on actually catching the ball 65 times because I'm going to throw it to you in a position where you can catch it. Now, are you going to drop some? For sure. Absolutely. I get it. Right. But I'm going to at least give you an opportunity to get better while we're going through our throwing program. To help boost a little confidence too. It's like, man, I played catch with coach today. That was really fun. I know coach played at a high level and he wanted to play catch with me. And those little things really do help, right? But then it needs to be into a positive setting. And then at that point, you can actually get into a little bit of one-on-one time with the player while they're throwing. That's one of the only times that you can really do a one-on-one time without taking away really from anyone else on the field of what they're doing is because I'm just playing catch with the kid. And it's just so simple. It's catch, but it's the most important thing we do at practice throughout your entire career. The whole playing catch and getting loose is so wasted by so many teams and so many youth players. It blows my mind. It's just thousands of bad reps consistently taken. And then somehow you're supposed to have a good rep after that. When you've had thousands of them, like I said, you made 85 not focused throws before a game. And then you're expected to make a good throw with someone running down the line after a ball was hit to you. And you expect to be successful at 10, 11, 12 years old. You're not that good. Not to be rude, right? They're not that good. They can't just flip a switch. They haven't thrown hundreds of thousands of throws their entire lives. And even at the big league level, these guys are still playing catch with a purpose. Every single day they play catch with a purpose.
The professional pitchers, as a Dodger fan, Kershaw, he has every throw, everything he does detailed down to the minute. So again, that's a little overkill for youth baseball, but he knows exactly where he's going to be standing on the field, doing what stretch, what throw, what part of his bullpen, probably within seconds of where he should be. So coaches at the youth level, we can surely put together a throwing routine. So what I would recommend is pick the partners and you can just read it off real quick. This doesn't need to take more than 20 seconds. You can read it off and say, Johnny, you're with Joe. And that allows you to control the flamethrower, not ending up with a kid who might not be able to catch. But at least you could rotate. Maybe you have 10 out of 12 kids that can pretty much catch any throw, but you can keep them circulating around.
Right.
As a coach, like what you were saying, so I think there's another benefit of what you're saying, going and playing with that playing catch as the coach with the kid who's not very good. You said something very interesting that now the kid can just focus on really throwing the ball, not having to play fetch or catch wild throws from his partner, because you as the coach, much more likely, especially you, are going to be much more likely to throw quality throws. So now their focus can simply be on making good throws rather than trying to catch every throw or shagging. But also it gives that player some kind of maybe even something they don't realize at the time, but it gives them some attention. It's easy to give the all-star and the cleanup hitter a lot of love, and the leadoff hitter and the best pitcher, they always get a lot of love. But by showing and giving time to that kid that's not that great, everybody sees that, hey, coach is over there giving that kid time. Well, maybe we shouldn't dismiss him as just an also-ran or some whatever. It just sends a message that even the kid with the least talent is worth the time of the coaches and the other players and is just as valuable. So I think there's a lot of benefits of that. The caveat would be making sure that you can coach up and make some rounds. So I wouldn't do it every practice, but definitely something that can be very advantageous, partnering up with that kid who really struggles and giving them your one-on-one attention as a coach. It really helps out in a lot of ways. You could always have an assistant coach do it too if you wanted to make some rounds because you saw your team struggling with their throwing routine or you're implementing the throwing routine, but definitely can be something you could do. An older sibling that's there that you just say, hey, that you could get in his ear right before and say, hey, can you go play catch with Johnny? Hey, don't throw your hardest, throw it pretty easy, but just can you go play catch with him? Maybe like you have an older brother that's 14 and he's coming down to play with his younger brother's 10-year-old team. So there's definitely different ways you can do it.
I do make a note though, if I ever do have that, I usually don't let the brothers actually play catch. I usually have like the older brother play catch with somebody else.
All right, that wraps up part 2 of the interview. Part 3 next week. Nick's going to talk about the biggest struggle he's faced as a youth baseball coach and also the biggest problem he sees in the youth baseball world. Nick also shares a very effective tip to help us get our players to pay closer attention throughout the game. And Nick is also going to share his pros and cons on private lessons, his pros and cons of private lessons. And next week, before we dive into part 3, I will share out a mental game tip for all of us coaches to use as the season is getting into full swing. If you haven't already, head over and get the updated Drill Design Guide 3.0. It's free. It's right on the homepage, 8020baseball.com. You can't miss it. You can have it in less than 60 seconds. Just throw in your first name, your email, and you'll get an email right away from me with a little message and the Drill Design Guide. It's about a 20 to 30 minute read. It'll really help give you clarity on what it takes to design high quality, top notch drills, all the parts that go into it, all the things that are needed. So head over to 8020baseball.com, get that Drill Design Guide. It was recently updated. And until next week, let's take care of our health, our families. Let's be there for our close friends. Let's take this information out there to the field and let's put it into play. All right, 8020 baseball community. Until next week, adios.
This has been the 80-20 Baseball Masterclass. Take it to the field.